Ron Howard may have been the show's red-headed darling, but there wasn't always sunshine and rainbows in Mayberry. Although the show depicted a close-knit small-town family, the real dynamics were far more complicated. We went to the wrap party that was the Andy Griffith Show's finale. Knots, but there was one castmate he secretly despised, and he wasn't alone. This same person also started the one feud that not even Andy Griffith could forgive. The tension was palpable, and the animosity was long suppressed. It wasn't until recently that the castmates' actions drove a wedge between Mayberry and the Andy Griffith Show that the animosity finally came to light. Mayberry, a beloved classic that aired on CBS from October 3, 1960 to April 1, 1968, had 249 half-hour episodes, 159 of which were in black and white and 90 in color. The show captured a simpler time, but there was a much more complicated world behind its sweet southern charm. Although the show's setting was fictional, Andy Griffith portrayed Sheriff Andy Taylor, a widowed lawman raising his young son Opie, played by a young Ron Howard, in the sleepy town of Mayberry, North Carolina. The production process wasn't always as tranquil as the town it brought to life. Capturing the show's magic, director Mel Brooks reflected on the production. It was of a time gone by, comparing it to the 1930s rather than the 1960s. The cast of characters quickly became beloved American icons. There was the overly eager but hilariously inept Deputy Barney Fade brought to life by Don Knotts, the kind and steady Aunt Bee portrayed by Frances. Although the Andy Griffith Show had a generally positive tone, there were times when tension simmered off camera, particularly when egos clashed and personalities didn't always mesh. One feud between Andy Griffith and Bavier, along with a precocious yet grounded Opie, formed a heartwarming family unit that appeared to reflect real-life connections, or so fans believed. Not even Mayberry could keep secrets forever, but the show was a huge hit. It never dropped below 7th place in the Nielsen ratings, and it achieved the rarest of feats by ending its final season at the top of the heap, behind only I Love Lucy and Seinfeld. Griffith, on the other hand, never got an Emmy while the show was airing, and co-stars Knotts and Bavier won 6 apiece. The show's legacy continued with spin-offs like Goomer Pile USMC, a reunion film in 1986, and the continuation series Mayberry RFD. Fans still celebrate Mayberry at a festival in Griffith's hometown of Mount Airy, North Carolina, every year, clinging to a town that never actually existed, all because of the show. Ron Howard may be most recognized today as a highly esteemed Hollywood director, but he was America's beloved red-headed boy on one set long before he stepped behind the camera. In the meantime, the myth of Mayberry continued to captivate audiences, and one lad from that set was stealthily getting ready for a life beyond the front porch and fishing pole background. Ronald William Howard was born into a showbiz family in Duncan, Oklahoma, on March 1, 1954. His father, Rance Howard, was an actor, writer, and director. He was born Rance Beckenholt, but adopted the stage name Howard when he was born. Jean Spiegel Howard was an actress, and Ronald's mother was also an actress. Ron's upbringing was shaped by his diverse heritage, which includes German, English, Scottish, Irish, and Dutch influences. His upbringing in the United States reflected the idealized characters he would portray. He received part of his education on the sets of studios like Desilu, where he worked as a child actor, and part of it in Burbank, California, schools like John. Although he went on to attend USC's esteemed School of Cinematic Arts, Ron Howard did not graduate because his career path was already taking him in a different direction. He began his acting career at the tender age of 5 in the film The Journey, and went on to appear in a number of television series, including The Twilight Zone, The Dupin Show with June Allison Dennis, and many more. His breakthrough role came in 1960, when he was cast as Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show. At the time, he was known as Ronnie Howard. For 8 seasons, he played the son of Sheriff Andy Taylor, Andy Griffith. Looking back on his first days on set, Howard recalled being fixated on A. Even though it aired in the 1960s, the series was defined by its tone of gentle guidance and subtle humor. I remember him looking at the toy turtle and telling me that it was kind of funny to have to pretend that it was dead. I just remember a very relaxed first impression. With a vibrant cast of Mayberry townspeople and Don Knotts' iconic performance as Barney F. Frances Bavier's wise and nurturing Aunt B, The Andy Griffith Show embraced a tone of old-fashioned Americana that was both nostalgic and evocative of a simpler time. Despite never winning an Emmy for Outstanding Comedy, the show became a household name in America. Series, for which he was nominated 3 times and shared a total of 6 acting Emmys with co-stars Knotts and Bavier. However, Howard's career didn't come to a halt with The Andy Griffith Show. In fact, it wasn't until 1974 that his role as Richie Cunningham on Happy Days began to gain traction. Happy Days was originally a spin-off of Love American Style, but it became a smash hit upon its debut. Henry Winkler's leather-jacketed, street-smart fans were the ideal counterpoint to the wholesome, clean-cut Richie Howard on set. The two had genuine chemistry off-screen as well, and their work together propelled Happy Days to pop culture legend. However, Howard had ambitions beyond acting. He began to explore directing with 1977's. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Howard directed numerous TV movies for NBC, including the 1980 film Skyward starring screen legend, and starred in Eat My Dust, a low-budget action comedy co-written with his father. This opportunity came as part of a clever deal with producer Roger Corman. After directing the wild comedy Night Shift in 1982, which starred Shelley Long, Michael Keaton, and Henry Winkler, Howard became an unstoppable creative force in the industry. In 1984, he directed the romantic fantasy comedy Splash, which starred Tom Hanks, Daryl Hannah, Eugene Levy, John Candy, and Daryl Cole. The film was a commercial and critical success. Critical success demonstrating Howard's ability to produce hits with heartfelt humor and broad appeal. What started with a toy turtle and a role as Opie Taylor blossomed into a lifelong career for Ron Howard. From his days as a child actor, Howard was always a storyteller in training, and he made sure Hollywood never forgot it. Behind the seemingly carefree pace of life in Mayberry, real tension simmered, and no camera could capture them all. Howard got his start on a set that wasn't nearly as sunny as it appeared. The drama on The Andy Griffith Show didn't just unfold on screen. Some of the most emotional storylines were happening behind the scenes as well. Andy Griffith and Frances Bavier, who played Sheriff Andy Taylor and Aunt B, respectively, were iconic figures of mid-century entertainment and television royalty. Despite their on-screen harmony, their real-life relationship was anything but amicable, mirroring the infamously strained friendship between Griffith and Bavier's strained relationship added a dramatic dimension to the feel-good classic starring Selena Gomez and Francia Raisa. Fans and entertainment historians have long been curious about this rift, which stemmed from profound personality clashes and differing professional values. It wasn't just a short misunderstanding. Rather, it was a Cold War an undercurrent of animosity that persisted behind the scenes of Mayberry and persisted long after the show's final episode aired has become an ingrained aspect of the show's legacy, casting a shadow over the sunny nostalgia that viewers associate with Andy Griffith's portrayal of the cool, collected host. The show's tone was defined by Sheriff Andy Taylor, a widowed father, wise lawman, and a constant moral compass for the town. He balanced parenting, policing, and neighborly disputes with timeless grace, and his smile and steady hand made him easy to be around. sharing that warm space on the. Actress Frances Bavier portrayed Andy Taylor's no-nonsense, kind-hearted Aunt Bee on the show. Aunt Bee was more than a caretaker. She was the emotional center of the Taylor household, providing solace through home-cooked meals, gentle corrections, and timeless wisdom. Bavier's portrayal of Aunt Bee made her a cultural icon and the archetypal television aunt, and Sheriff Taylor and Aunt Bee represented iconic country music. The show's creators, Griffith and Bavier, had a rocky working relationship due to their fundamentally different approaches to their craft and to each other. Despite the fact that their characters portrayed the ideal small-town family life, the reality behind the scenes was far more turbulent. Being extremely private, Bavier kept her distance from her co-stars on set, in contrast to Andy Griffith's outgoing personality. This made her seem distant and unapproachable. However, the real problem wasn't Bavier's reticent nature. It was her high expectations of herself and those around her. This led to tension with Ron Howard, who played Little Opie Taylor, frequently gushed about Griffith's positive influence on set. On the other hand, Howard Morris, who directed multiple episodes and played Ernest T. Bass, once compared working with Bavier to navigating a landmine. Just asking her to move a few inches for camera framing could set off intense resistance, because she was so particular about her. Her meticulousness, while commendable, occasionally caused awkward confrontations with her co-workers. In an interview referenced by Cheat Sheet, Griffith recounted a memorable and painful attempt at reconciliation, recounting how he once dropped by Bavier's house unannounced in an effort to patch fences, but the gesture backfired. Fiercely guarded her privacy, was not pleased by the unexpected visit. Instead of mending old wounds, the encounter deepened them and reinforced the wall between them. However, as life has a way of humbling even the most resolute hearts, change occurs. As Bavier battled cancer near the end of her life, she had moments of reflection, so she picked up the phone and reached out to Griffith, finally able to let her guard down after years of animosity, and explained. Bavier apologized honestly. I'm sorry we didn't get along better. It was my fault. Griffith recalled the incident years later. It was a powerful gesture that finally put him to rest when she admitted to being difficult, acknowledged his leadership on the show, and credited him with much of its success. Although Frances Bavier was born and raised in New York City, she spent her last years in North Carolina, the same town where her on-screen character Aunt Bee had lived after retiring from acting in 1972. There, she found solace and made connections with the locals, who remembered her as reserved but kind, quite different from the. Tragically, Bavier battled serious health issues, with a focus on heart-related complications. She spent her last days in the hospital, receiving medical care at Chatham. Just 1 week before she passed away, she was discharged from the coronary care unit, but her condition remained fragile. The official cause of death was. According to CNN Entertainment, Andy Griffith also lived to be 86 years old. He passed away quietly at his home on Roanoke Island, North Carolina, early one Tuesday morning. Many believe that it was due to her ongoing heart issues. Even in her final chapter, she maintained the same dignity and reserve that had defined her life and career. The details of his passing were kept under wraps, but it was a profound blow to the entertainment industry. A statement from Griffith's family confirmed that he had been laid to rest in Roanoke Island, his cherished haven and the spot where he had discovered inner peace. The deaths of the two celebrities signaled the end of an era, but they also served to remind viewers of the complex narratives that lie beneath the surface of television. It's not about who is more right or wrong. In the end, it was about two artists seeing the humanity in each other and choosing to let go of their animosity. The legacy they left behind is one of talent, heart, and forgiveness, and while the Andy Griffith Show chapter closed in Ron, Hollywood is filled with whirlwind romances, public heartbreaks, and headline-grabbing love stories. But in Howard's early life, another story was quietly unfolding, a match made in heaven. This kind of love doesn't make headlines every day. It doesn't scream or demand the spotlight. It just quietly, steadily endures, decade after decade. With all the hustle and bustle, Ron and Cheryl managed to create something truly special out of their 50 years of marriage. On June 7, 2025, they celebrated their golden anniversary with a photo of the two of them standing on the beach at sunset. There was no big celebration, no red carpet, just the two of them. His words were filled with gratitude for his family, the memories, and the journey they had shared. He likened their love to a river ride, complete with calm waters and tricky rapids. He attributed their success to a simple secret: they just kept paddling. They met two teenagers in California, with bright eyes and bigger dreams, when they were 16 years old. The warm glow of twilight illuminated their faces as they shared their secrets. Their first date was a delightful 1970s romance. Ron picked up Cheryl in his mint green Volkswagen Beetle, took her to the movies, and then they grabbed pizza. The car wasn't fancy, but it got them where they needed to go. She had a quiet strength and that famous red hair. He always said there was nobody else like her. "It still runs great, so do we," Ron would later chuckle and remark. 5 years after that date, they stood in Burbank, California and said, "I do." The guest list was filled with friends, family, and even some former co-stars of Happy Days, like the late Tom Bosley. Ron had only begun filming the sitcom a year prior, and life was. The pace was quick, but he knew Cheryl was his rock. Despite this, she was hesitant to say yes at first. It took 3 of his proposals. Cheryl, who was always deliberate and thoughtful, explained that she wasn't ready to commit just yet because she had other goals, like finishing school, building her life, and creating her own future. Their daughter Bryce would go on to call her mama force of nature, woman who grounded everyone, including Ron. In hindsight, Cheryl reflected that it was Ron's love of storytelling that initially drew her in, and that it continues to do so today. Together, they brought up 4 children, Bryce, Paige, and Howard, who were all successful in their own right, but the Howards were never simply a Hollywood family. They were a cohesive unit, a team, because of their common love of storytelling. Joined forces, and it was evident that love became the most remarkable tale they had ever told. Their daughters frequently referred to Cheryl as the beating heart of the family. Paige once confessed that attempting to articulate the depth of their love for their mother brought tears to her eyes. Cheryl was referred to as the sun, moon, stars, and guiding light. Their chemistry remained strong and their lives remained aligned even as their worlds expanded. Ron feels supremely fortunate not only for their love, but for the lessons and blessings they have received. He says that communication matters, luck also plays a role, but most importantly, he says that you have to grow together, change, adapt, and let each other evolve. On their 50th wedding anniversary in 2023, Ron surprised Cheryl with a drive in the mint green VW Bug they had on their first date. They took the scenic route, letting the wind blow through the windows as they reminisced about the good times and bad. Their quiet understanding had gotten them through it all. Echoing the familiar sounds of the road and the gentle hum of the engine, Ron and Cheryl reminisced about the beginning of their love story. Unlike the extravagant restaurants and champagne toasts that Hollywood so often celebrates, the quiet, patient love that they shared for 50 years was not forged in fairy tales, but in kitchens, minivans, and sleepless nights. The plot isn't flashy, but it doesn't need to be either. It's firmly established and has stood the test of time, and even after all these years, it's only getting better. Ron Howard is one of the rare actors who has managed to make an impression on screen and off. Among the select few, he joins legendary figures like Clint Eastwood. Howard began his career in television in the 1960s and 1970s, when he was a fixture as Little Opie on The Andy Griffith Show and later as Richie Cunningham in Happy Days. He went on to direct more films than act in them, unlike most of his contemporaries like Bradley Cooper, George Clooney, Greta Gerwig, Jordan Peele, and Eastwood. Famous people, but behind that amiable exterior was a student preparing for a much greater challenge. In 1977, he tried his hand at directing with an experimental short film called Grand Theft Auto, which had nothing to do with the video game. It was chaotic, emotional, and shot to stardom. From that point on, Howard became a household name in Hollywood, but he had his share of setbacks. In the 1980s, he directed Splash, an entertaining romantic fantasy starring Tom Hanks and Willow. The film boldly told an adventure story and showcased his talent, but not everyone took him seriously. A few of his films in the 90s also bombed, and critics started to question whether he could ever make another great film. The new millennium brought How the Grinch Stole Christmas and a few more forgettable efforts. Everything changed a year later with A Beautiful Mind, which told the true story of John Nash, a brilliant mathematician who struggled with mental illness. The film, which starred Russell Crowe, Jennifer Connelly, Ed Harris, and Christopher Plummer, was powerful, moving, and unforgettable. Even before the Oscars, many predicted it would sweep, and Howard walked the red carpet. Oscars for Best Director, Best Picture, Best Supporting Actress, and Best Adapted Screenplay were handed out, but not everyone was celebrating. Some were upset that crucial parts of Nash's life, his duality, a child he had outside of his marriage, and the fact that he didn't support the child, had been omitted. Critics accused Howard of watering down the truth, an accusation he later acknowledged. Regarding someone who has spent nearly 7 decades in the spotlight, Ron Howard has earned a reputation as Hollywood's calmest storm. But the removal of those parts to concentrate on the story's core still didn't stop the backlash. What bothered Howard the most, not the criticism, but how it began to impact Nash personally, which he said was crossing the line. The steady, mild-mannered Howard is the director that studios turn to when they want results without drama. However, even Howard has boundaries that he won't allow others to cross, and these boundaries have become more apparent in recent years. Howard once transformed Hillbilly Elegy, J.D. Vance's best-selling memoir, into a high-profile Netflix film. He approached this project with great care, concentrating on the Vance's upbringing was marked by grit and resilience. During that time, politics didn't take center stage in their conversations. Howard was content without Vance being a senator or even involved in politics. He was seeking a story, not a policy partner. However, the man Howard once sought to understand has since veered off the path. Vance is now a politician, and he may be on the verging on becoming vice president, and his current rhetoric is completely different from the person Howard once knew. The filmmaker has expressed his surprise and disappointment with Vance's transformation without resorting to dramatic outbursts. Howard isn't usually one to publicly lash out, but this time something clicked for someone who has spent their career avoiding. Before he was a child star on The Andy Griffith Show, America's favorite feel-good series, on screen, Ron Howard was a charming child star on the show. However, his recent shift in tone was heavy and personal, reminiscent of an incident from his life many decades ago, when a seemingly nice co-star made the set life far from wholesome. While viewers saw a loving aunt cooing over her nephew Howard, behind-the-scenes things weren't always sunshine and rainbows in Mayberry. One cast member, young Ron, hated having to share scenes with Frances Bavier, better known as Aunt B. She was icy and never treated him like the beloved child America thought he was. Howard never pretended to be Aunt B, which is remembered as his favorite memory from his time on the show. Back then, He was simply a boy playing Opie, keeping his head down, doing his job, and smiling through it all. However, there were moments when his smile slipped, like in the now famous Pickle Story episode, Opie was forced to eat jars of Aunt Bee's infamously bad pickles. Little did viewers know that Ron detested pickles, and would eat them over and over again, enduring nothing but misery. The emotional tension between Ron and Bavier during that scene added a cherry on top, but it was never fully resolved. Those familiar with the situation could attest to the fact that Howard had learned early on what it was like to work with someone who made you feel small. So when J.D. Vance started speaking in a way that seemed to be directed at him, it was clear that he and Bavier had a strained relationship. Bavier wasn't cruel, but she was cold and never warmed up to him. This icy coldness lingered in his memory, not as bitterness but as clarity. He didn't need to accuse anyone. The silence between his lines conveyed enough. Years ago, Howard had also been criticized for A Beautiful Mind, which won the Oscars but also had its share of problems. This time, though, it was about trust, empathy, and being caught off guard by someone you thought you understood. Took heat for leaving out key details about its subject, John Nash, and served as a cautionary tale about the perils of retelling someone else's story, particularly a complicated one, without revealing too much or too little. In either case, the storyteller ends up bearing the brunt of the criticism. As he watches Vance climb the political ladder, Howard finds himself bearing yet another burden, and it's not because he made a mistake. Not a good film, but because the protagonist changed into someone completely different. It resurfaces the pain he felt years ago when his Aunt Bee's coldness never warmed him up to the fake warmth he had to pretend for her. Howard's lesson: don't judge a person by their outward appearance. Charisma, a good script, or a best-selling book don't always indicate authenticity. People can change and let you down. They have the ability to reshape their own narratives in ways that make you wonder why you ever bothered to assist them with telling the story. However, Howard remains unbitter. He has progressed from an awkward child actor to a director with Oscars and decades of credibility in Hollywood. Howard has learned to seize his opportunities, and this particular political moment was his chance to shine. He refrained from ranting. The stories we believe today shape the headlines we wake up to tomorrow. If anyone knows how easily a character can fool an audience, it's Ron Howard. He's seen it play out on screen, on set, and now on the national stage. So watch closely, think critically, and vote, please. If you've watched this and enjoyed it, please share your thoughts in the comments section. If you're a fan of mixed martial arts, be sure to subscribe and watch the next video.